I stood there frozen, the manila envelope trembling in my grasp as my son's words echoed. I have a surprise for you. A mother should expect flowers, a letter, maybe even gratitude. Instead, I unfolded $7 million of ruin written under my name. My son's silence weighed heavier than the debt itself, and in that moment I realized the cruelest surprises don't come from life. They come from the child you thought you could trust. We're about to begin, but if you'd like, share where you're joining from. It reminds me this story doesn't echo into silence. It lands somewhere real. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. Rachel loved the quiet hum of early mornings. It was just past 8:15 a.m. when the final client report landed in her inbox, neatly formatted, ahead of schedule. She sat back in her ergonomic chair, sipped her cinnamon-spiced coffee, and glanced around the loft-style home office she'd built from scratch. The space smelled of lemon oil and fresh paper, her version of calm. The sky outside was a soft gradient of blue and gold. Light spilled across her desk in stripes, warming the edge of her laptop. Everything about the day, so far, was seamless. A small win after a long stretch of late nights. Then came the knock. 3 soft taps. Rachel froze. She wasn't expecting anyone. Her calendar was clear, and her phone hadn't buzzed. Curious, she pushed back her chair and walked barefoot across the hardwood. Through the peephole, Ethan. She hesitated for half a second, then opened the door. There he stood, grinning like a kid who'd just pulled off something clever. Slate gray hoodie, jeans, tousled hair that somehow always looked styled without effort. "Morning," he said, stepping inside without waiting for an invite. "I've got a surprise." Rachel arched an eyebrow, folding her arms. "What kind of surprise?" "The kind that changes everything," Ethan said, pulling a thick manila envelope from behind his back. "For you." His voice had that lilt, a practiced blend of mischief and charm, but his hands trembled slightly as he extended the packet. Rachel didn't move right away. The envelope looked too official, too heavy with implication. Still, she reached for it, her fingers brushing his. It wasn't sealed, just clasped. She undid the fastener and slid the papers out. The first page was clean, crisp, and dense with legal language. Bolded near the top. Notice of financial obligation. Primary debtor. Rachel M. Barlow. Total amount due, $7,124,390.11. Her breath caught. She blinked, thinking maybe it was some kind of mistake. Maybe this was a joke. A twisted one, sure, but Ethan had always had a warped sense of humor. She flipped the page, then another. Pages and pages. Loan agreements, signed guarantees, payment defaults, corporate jargon she understood too well. Her name appeared again and again, her digital signature, her old business license. Each word landed like a slap. She lowered the stack slowly, unable to lift her eyes. What is this?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. His grin faltered, retreating into something stiffer, less confident. He shifted his weight between his feet, glancing down at the floor like a teenager caught in a lie. "I needed capital," he said finally, "for the startup. We needed that push." Rachel stared at him. "You forged my signature." His silence said everything. "You used my credit line." Still no denial. "You put $7 million under my name?" He looked up then, guilt and panic flickering behind his eyes. "It wasn't supposed to spiral like this. I thought we'd be profitable in 6 months. I just needed your name to get through the door." "You never asked." "You would have said no." Her hands went cold. Her throat tightened. For a long second, she couldn't decide whether to scream or collapse. The betrayal slithered beneath her skin, slow and venomous. Every word she wanted to say crashed into the next, forming nothing but silence. "I was going to fix it," Ethan added quickly, stepping forward. "I've been working non-stop." trying to, "Rachel, please, say something." But she couldn't. Her mind spun, not just from the debt, but from the layers of deceit it revealed. All those months he'd been working late, all the vague answers, the deflected questions. It hadn't been stress. It hadn't been pressure. It had been strategy. He'd weaponized her trust. She took a shaky step back. Ethan reached out, his voice quieter now. "I didn't want to hurt you. I just didn't see another option." Rachel's expression hardened. Her voice, when it finally came, was low and sharp as cut glass. "You just did." The papers lay scattered on the coffee table like broken glass, sharp, unfixable, already cutting. Rachel stood frozen beside them, arms crossed so tightly across her chest it felt like a cage. Ethan sat on the edge of the couch, elbows on his knees, palms pressed together like a man praying to a god he didn't believe in. His eyes darted toward her, then back to the floor. "I know how this looks," he started, voice threadbare. She didn't respond. "I was trying to—" He paused, searching for a word that didn't exist. It started small, just one fund, something short-term, high yield. Rachel let out a breath, not quite a laugh, not quite a scoff. Those are the words people use right before they light their lives on fire. Ethan winced. "I didn't go in blind, I read everything. I had spreadsheets, forecasts, consultants." "Stop." Her voice cracked like a whip, silencing the room. She could hear the ticking of the old clock in the hallway, the sound of reality grinding forward even as hers stood still. She looked at him hard, trying to find the boy she raised, the one who wore mismatched socks and used to make her burnt birthday pancakes. That version was nowhere in sight. All she saw was a man shrinking in guilt, hunched beneath the weight of 7 zeros he'd dropped onto her life without warning. You don't just accidentally take out millions in loans under someone else's name. "I didn't mean to drag you into it," he said, and he sounded like he believed it. That made it worse. "I was always going to pay it back." "With what? Monopoly money?" Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. He rubbed his hands over his face like he could erase the shame. "I thought I could flip it," he said finally. "The tech space was blowing up, and I found this platform, digital analytics, built on blockchain, totally unregulated. Early investors were doubling in 90 days. I had a shot, Mom." She flinched at the word. Mom. The way it landed now felt manipulative. "So you took more," she said quietly, "to recover the first loss." He nodded, eyes glassy. "And when that didn't work, you chased another." His voice dropped. "Yeah. How many?" He hesitated. Rachel's nails dug into her forearms. "How many?" "5. Maybe 6, he muttered. "Different sectors, startups, a hedge fund in Austin, crypto stuff. Some of it overseas." She staggered back a step like the air itself had just hit her. "Jesus, Ethan!" He looked up, finally meeting her eyes. "I swear to you, I didn't expect it to implode. I thought I was being smart. Diversifying. That's what they call it, right?" "Diversifying," she repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "You're talking about my name, my future, my credit, my retirement." His lower lip trembled. "I didn't know where else to go." Rachel turned away. She couldn't look at him anymore. Her son, her only child, had turned her life into a legal minefield. Her thoughts spiraled. What would happen to her home? Her accounts? Could they take her business? Did she even have a business left? Her chest tightened, fury rising like a storm behind her ribs. "You were raised better than this." "I know." "No," she snapped, spinning around. "You don't. Because if you knew, you wouldn't have sat there every Sunday night, eating my lasagna and lying through your teeth." His face twisted. "I didn't want to disappoint you." "You buried me." Ethan stood then, as if he might reach for her, but stopped short. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "Sorry is free," she said, her voice flat. "This isn't." He looked at her like a boy again, lost, scared, incapable of understanding the wreckage behind him. But Rachel understood, because she was the one left holding the wreckage, and the wreckage had her name on it. Rachel's thumb hovered above the contact name. Daniel. Tapping that name would blow the whole thing open. Old history. Old damage. But this wasn't a mess she could mop up with a checkbook and a phone call. Not anymore. She let her hand fall to her side, then turned back toward Ethan. He was still standing in the middle of the room, shoulders rounded like if he made himself small enough, maybe the debt would shrink with him. Something inside her snapped. She didn't raise her voice, didn't hurl the envelope or kick him out. That would have been easy. What she felt was worse than rage. It was the slow, suffocating heat of betrayal wrapped in maternal instinct. A storm she didn't know how to let out. "You're going to tell me everything," she said, her tone like steel stretched thin. "Start from the beginning. No more gaps. No more vagueness. What pulled you into this?" Ethan nodded slowly, like he'd been bracing for it. "There was a guy," he began, "at a tech mixer last year in DC, big-name investor. Said he'd mentored 3 startups that hit unicorn status in 18 months. He was running a new fund, invite only. Wanted in on the ground floor." Rachel didn't blink. "I didn't want to look like a lightweight, so I leveraged some of the business accounts. When that wasn't enough, I used your EIN." She closed her eyes. Of course he did. "It worked," he went on. "At first, the returns came in fast. It felt real. Like I had finally made something happen on my own. Then the payout slowed and the guy started pushing new options. Crypto staking pools, AI algorithm trades, all high yield, and I kept going." Rachel's blood ran cold. "You never read the contracts, did you?" she asked. He shook his head, guilt thick in the motion. "They looked legit. They had seals, disclaimers, lawyers CC'd on the emails. I didn't think—" "No," she cut in. "You didn't. You never do." That part slipped out harder than she meant. But she didn't take it back. Because now her mind was clawing backward, to the warnings. The small talks over wine, the quiet arguments at family dinners, her voice urging caution, budgeting, due diligence. "Your future's not a dice roll, Ethan," she'd said more times than she could count. He never listened. She rubbed her temples, fury rising behind her eyes like a migraine. "Do you even understand what happens when that kind of money goes missing? This isn't bouncing a rent check. These people don't send reminder notices. They send federal agents. They seize assets. They freeze accounts. They subpoena everyone." "I know," he said softly. "No, you don't. Because you're still standing here waiting for me to fix it." That landed hard. Ethan looked down like he couldn't bear the weight of her disappointment. "I didn't come here for money. I came because I didn't know what else to do." Her gut twisted. For years, she'd stepped in when things got messy, covered his car note when he got laid off, co-signed his last apartment, quietly paid off his credit card when his score tanked. It had always been easy to write a check and tell herself she was helping. This wasn't that. This was financial arson. Rachel paced the room once, twice, then stopped. Her instincts screamed at her to take control. To call a lawyer, refinance the house, find a way to clean up the wreckage before it became a public scandal. But beneath all of that, deeper, was something colder. She couldn't fix this. Not alone. And maybe she shouldn't. She glanced again at her phone, still gripped in her hand. Ethan saw it too. "Who are you about to call?" he asked. She didn't answer, because the truth was worse than anything he was expecting. She was thinking about Daniel Knox, The man who once tore her life in half and vanished with the other piece. Ethan's father. The man Ethan had never forgiven her for walking away from. The phone rang twice before Peter picked up. Rachel? She didn't speak right away. Her throat tightened. The last time she called him in a panic, it had been over her father's stroke, and Peter had dropped everything to drive through a snowstorm and sit in that ICU for 12 straight hours. He wasn't family, but he was Peter. Solid, predictable, always there. I need your brain, she said. That was all it took. Okay, he replied, instantly alert. Talk to me. Rachel exhaled, staring at the window but seeing nothing. It's Ethan. She heard the pause on the other end, heard him pivot in his chair, probably reaching for his notebook like he always did when things got serious. He forged my information, she continued. Used my EIN, my business credentials, racked up over $7 million in debt through illegal investments. Peter let out a long breath. Jesus. He says it started as a startup fund, but it turned into something else. Something big. Unregulated markets, offshore wallets, multiple ventures. She sat down on the edge of her bed, the mattress sagging beneath her like it couldn't bear the weight either. I don't know where to start, she whispered. Peter didn't interrupt. His silence was never empty. It always felt like space he gave her to think out loud. I thought about selling the condo, she said. Maybe the beach property. Even if I liquidate everything, it still won't cover what he owes. Peter's voice came through low and steady. Don't move anything yet. You need a lawyer. A real one, white collar. Now. I already called Hannah, Rachel said. She's squeezing me in this afternoon. Good, he said, because this isn't just fraud. If it involves offshore accounts and that much unsecured capital, we're talking federal attention. Possibly RICO. Her stomach dropped at the acronym. She'd heard enough stories to know how fast those letters turned lives into courtrooms and seized assets. I'm scared, she admitted. I know, Peter said, but you're not stupid and you're not alone. You've handled worse. Rachel almost laughed, but the sound didn't come out. Worse? Maybe in terms of heartbreak. But this was annihilation. Legal, financial, emotional. Everything in one slow landslide. Later that afternoon, she sat across from Hannah McKay in a corner office that smelled faintly of leather and eucalyptus. The walls were lined with law books no one touched anymore. Everything serious, everything sterile. The kind of place where disasters got dissected. Hannah flipped through the documents Rachel had brought, her manicured fingers flying over the pages. The silence between them stretched long enough to make Rachel's chest ache. When Hannah finally looked up, her expression was tight. Rachel, she said, this isn't just a financial screw-up. It's criminal exposure, wire fraud, identity theft, possible conspiracy charges if the investigators decide you weren't as uninvolved as you claim. Rachel's jaw locked. They think I was in on it? Not yet, Hannah said. But the moment this hits the wrong agency, Treasury, FBI, FinCEN, they'll start connecting dots. You're on the documents. You're listed as guarantor. That puts you in the story, whether you knew about it or not. Rachel leaned forward. What are my options? Hannah took a deep breath. Step 1. Declare your identity was used without consent. You'll need to file a formal affidavit. We'll start the process of financial forensics. Prove your digital signature was faked. But it's not easy. And it doesn't stop the collectors. Rachel's fingers curled into fists. Second, Hannah continued, we need to prepare for the fact that some of these ventures Ethan got involved with are not legal entities. If he accepted money from certain players, you're not just dealing with debt. You're dealing with people who don't knock twice. Rachel blinked. What do you mean? Hannah closed the folder slowly. Some of these funds, they don't go to collections. They go to enforcement. A chill ran down Rachel's spine. You think he borrowed from criminals? Hannah didn't answer right away, but she didn't have to. Rachel drove to the office of Cooper Financial on autopilot, the world outside her windshield a blur of motion she didn't register. Her knuckles were white on the steering wheel. David Cooper had handled her accounts for over a decade, retirement planning, investment strategies, even Ethan's college fund. He'd sent her Christmas cards, knew her dog's name. And now he was on the other end of this mess. She parked, but didn't move. Not at first. She stared at the glass front building like it had betrayed her too. Eventually, she got out, walked past the receptionist's polite greeting, and went straight to David's door without knocking. He looked up from his desk, surprised, but not unsettled. Rachel, didn't know you had an appointment today. I don't. He blinked. Okay. Everything all right? Not even close. She closed the door behind her. David stood slowly, buttoning his blazer, always polished, always poised. 55, maybe 60, silver hair, neatly combed, hands that had never trembled in front of a spreadsheet. Rachel didn't sit. She pulled out the thick folder Hannah had returned to her that morning and dropped it onto his desk. I want you to explain how my son ended up entangled in $7 million of debt tied to offshore markets and predatory firms with shell addresses in the Cayman Islands. David glanced at the file but didn't open it. I'm sorry. What? You heard me? Rachel said. He finally picked up the top page, scanned it, and then looked at her again. Rachel, I had no idea Ethan was using your information for this. She folded her arms. But you advised him. I advised him generally, David said carefully. He asked me about private funds. I gave him some names. Safe ones? Nothing remotely like this. Safe? She echoed. He said he met one of your referrals at a mixer in D.C., guy running an invite-only fund. Ring a bell? David hesitated just long enough. Rachel saw it. That flicker. You gave him the name, didn't you? I didn't give anyone anything illegal, he replied. People network. I make introductions. Ethan's an adult. He makes his own decisions. She stepped closer. Don't dance around this with me, David. Did you know what these people were? His expression stayed neutral, but his voice grew flatter. I knew they were aggressive. That's not the same thing as criminal. Her jaw tightened. Aggressive? These firms don't deal in penalties. They deal in threats. My lawyer said they don't use collections. They use enforcement. And you sent my son toward that? I didn't send him anywhere, David said, now defensive. He was already chasing those risks. I figured if he was going to jump into that world, better he did it through someone I'd vetted than through some anonymous Reddit forum. Did you tell him to use my name? Of course not. Did you warn me? She pressed. I didn't think it concerned you, he said simply. Rachel stared at him, stunned. The man had managed her finances for years, managed her trust. And now, when her entire financial identity was unraveling, he sat across from her with all the concern of someone reviewing a lukewarm market report. You knew he was over his head, she said slowly. You had to know, and you still let him go on playing hedge fund cowboy with my assets hanging in the balance. David sat down again, folding his hands in front of him. Rachel, I'm sorry you're in this position, but you're emotional. You're hurt. I get it. Just don't start blaming people because your son made reckless decisions. Her face went cold. It wasn't just the words. It was the dismissiveness, the calculation, the faint flicker of annoyance behind his polished tone. Not guilt, not remorse. Just inconvenience. She turned to leave. I'll be transferring all of my accounts, she said. David didn't stop her. That's your choice. At the door, she paused. And David? Yes? If I find out you profited from any of this, even indirectly. I swear to God, I will burn your entire house of cards to the ground." His face froze. Rachel didn't wait for a response. Rachel sat on the back porch, wrapped in a knit blanket though the air wasn't cold. The sunset was wasting itself on the horizon, brilliant pinks, molten oranges, but she barely saw it. Her mind spun in quiet, ugly loops. Peter's voice echoed from earlier on speakerphone. "You can't abandon him now. Whatever he did, he's still your son." But Sarah's words? Sharper. Cut through even louder. "He forged your identity, Rach. This isn't a mistake. It's a crime. If you shield him from the fallout, he'll never stop." And that was the problem. They were both right. She glanced toward the kitchen where Ethan was pretending to organize the fridge, his silhouette taut with unease. Since she'd come back from Cooper Financial, he'd barely said 3 words. Guilt was chewing through him, but she wasn't sure guilt alone could fix $7 million in wreckage. Rachel sipped her now cold tea and stared down at her own hands, folded tightly in her lap. They used to fix things. Bandaged knees, broken zippers, missed homework deadlines. Her whole motherhood had been one long act of repair. But this wasn't a bike chain or a broken heart. This was a landmine. She rose slowly and stepped back into the house. "Ethan," she said. He turned around, jaw set. "I know what you're going to say." "I don't think you do." She nodded toward the dining table and they both sat, opposite ends, like 2 parties in a negotiation. "I've spoken to 2 attorneys," Rachel said. "I know what the law says. What it could mean for me. For you. And I know what my gut says." He shifted. "And?" "I haven't made a decision." He blinked. "About what?" "About whether I should help you fix this, or let you face it yourself." His shoulders dropped slightly, but he didn't argue. That was new. "I get it," he said after a long pause. "If the roles were reversed, I wouldn't know what to do either." Rachel tilted her head. "Wouldn't you?" He met her eyes. "I messed up. In a way I can't undo. But you're still you. You've always been the one who could pull a parachute when things fell apart." She smiled, bitter and brief. "Maybe that's the problem." They sat in the silence that follows truth. "You're not a child," she finally said. "You're not some clueless 22-year-old who bounced a rent check. You're 33. You built a company. You understand contracts. You understand fraud. You used my trust like currency. And now that it's all collapsed, you're hoping I still have enough love left to bail you out." He looked down. "That's not fair." "It's absolutely fair," she snapped. "You didn't just gamble with your life, Ethan. You gambled with mine." His hands curled into fists. "I didn't ask for this." "You didn't have to," she said. "You knew I'd come running." Her voice cracked. "You counted on it." That stunned silence again, the kind that follows when 2 people stop dancing around the truth and finally let it bleed. Ethan swallowed hard. "What do you want me to do?" "I want you to own it. Not just say sorry. Not just pout around the house waiting for the lawyers to clean up your mess. I want you to take full responsibility for everything. Call the agencies. Turn yourself in if it comes to that. Fight to fix it. Even if you fail. Because if I carry this for you, Ethan, you will never stop expecting me to." I didn't think it would go this far. And I didn't think I'd be sitting here, wondering if I should let my son go to prison. He stared at her, and for once, really, she thought he understood. Rachel stood, voice quieter now. "You don't need me to make a decision for you. You need to decide what kind of man you want to be next." She walked away before she could collapse under the weight of her own words. The house was too quiet. Rachel stood at the sink rinsing a mug she hadn't drunk from, her mind skipping like a scratched record. The note Ethan left sat folded on the counter like a detonator. "Don't wait up. What the hell did that mean? Was he trying to be noble? Reckless? Suicidal? She was reaching for her phone to call Peter when it buzzed in her hand. No caller ID, just a black screen and a numberless ring. She hesitated, then answered. Rachel Barlow? A low voice said, smooth as ice over steel. Her grip tightened. Who is this? You're listed on a delinquent asset agreement tied to EM Knox Holdings. I'm calling to inform you the terms of that debt have matured. Her spine straightened. You'll need to speak to my lawyer. We did, the voice replied. She referred us to you. That wasn't true. Hannah would never. The documents we have, the man continued, show you signed as financial backer. Whether you knew it or not is irrelevant. The loan defaults. The name attached pays. Rachel's throat dried out. What are you threatening me with? A pause. Then, this isn't a threat, Ms. Barlow. This is a courtesy. The line buzzed faintly with static. She realized she was holding her breath. You have until Friday at noon, the voice said. 7.4 million. Otherwise, recovery efforts begin. Her hand shook. I don't have that kind of money. That's unfortunate, the voice replied. Then maybe you shouldn't have signed. Click. The line went dead. Rachel stood frozen, the sound of her heartbeat roaring in her ears. Friday, noon. She replayed the voice in her head, trying to place the accent. No specific region. Polished, professional, but impersonal in a way that made it worse. Not a thug. Not some greasy loan shark. This was corporate crime in a tailored suit. She moved on instinct, grabbing her phone and dialing Hannah's direct line. It rang once, twice. Voicemail. Rachel didn't bother with pleasantries. Hannah, I just got a call from someone claiming to represent a collector tied to EM Knox Holdings. They gave me a deadline. Friday, noon. Said you gave them my number, which I know is bullshit. Please call me back the second you get this. She hung up and stood there, trying to slow her breathing. This wasn't about Ethan anymore. It wasn't even about fixing the damage. It was about surviving it. Rachel's mind spiraled. What if they followed through? Could they take her house? Her accounts? Could they come after her physically? Was this what Hannah meant by people who don't knock twice? She paced the kitchen, hands buried in her hair. She wanted to scream, to cry, to rewind the clock 6 months and tell Ethan to stay the hell away from mixers and venture capital and men with big promises. The front door rattled. Just wind. Still, she flinched. She opened her laptop, pulling up every file Ethan had emailed her about his company. She hadn't looked through them before. Not really. Just glossed them. Too angry to care. Now she cared. She needed something. Anything. She could use to prove Ethan had been misled. Coerced. That she hadn't known. But the spreadsheets were chaos. Shell company after shell company. Cross-referenced account numbers. Signatures she didn't recognize. Others she did. Hers. Duplicated. Forged. Her head throbbed. Where the hell had Ethan gone? She checked her phone again. No new texts. No missed calls. She tried his number one more time. Straight to voicemail. Her voice cracked as she left the message. Ethan, if you get this, call me. Now. This isn't about punishment anymore. It's about danger. The moment she hung up, her screen lit up with another unknown number. This time, she let it ring. 4 times. On the 5th, she answered. But the voice that came through wasn't the one from earlier. Mom, I think someone's following me. The words crackled through the line like broken glass. And then, silence. Rachel's hand flew to her chest, trying to steady her breath as her heart slammed against her ribs. She redialed. Voicemail. Again. Again. Where was he? She called Peter. No answer. She tried Sarah. Straight to voicemail. Rachel stood alone in the kitchen, shaking, phone pressed to her ear, willing the next ring to be Ethan. 10 agonizing minutes later, it was. This time she answered on the first ring. Ethan? Yeah, he said, breathless. Sorry. My phone dropped. I ran a few blocks. I think I lost him. Rachel gripped the edge of the counter. Where are you? Parking lot. Outside an old co-working space I used to use. Figured it'd be empty. I didn't know who else to call. She didn't scream, didn't accuse, didn't collapse into relief. She took a breath and said, Stay where you are, I'm coming. By the time she found him, Ethan looked worn down, hood up, eyes bloodshot, pacing in small loops near a flickering street lamp. He got in the passenger seat of her car without a word. Rachel didn't speak until they were halfway home. I got a call, from one of them. Ethan turned to her, wide-eyed. They contacted you? They said I have until Friday. Noon. His face crumpled. I didn't think they'd move that fast. You didn't think a lot of things. The words landed like a slap. Neither of them spoke for the rest of the drive. Back at the house, Rachel poured herself a glass of water she didn't drink. She leaned against the kitchen counter while Ethan stood a few feet away, like a student waiting for expulsion. I need to know everything, Ethan, she said. He ran a hand through his hair. You already do. No, she said. I know some. I know about the forged signature, the startup, the offshore accounts. What I don't know is what else you've buried. Ethan looked away. Rachel stepped forward. What aren't you telling me? He took a long breath. I took out personal loans. In my name. She froze. How much? Depends, he muttered. With interest? Probably 2 million? Maybe more? Rachel staggered back a step like he'd hit her. I kept thinking I could buy enough time to flip one into the other. Cover a loan with a payout. Cover the payout with a partnership. Then double it by reinvesting. He trailed off. And it never worked, she finished for him. He nodded. Her mind reeled. Who gave you that kind of credit? Ethan shrugged weakly. Startups can get crazy valuations. I had a partner who inflated our assets. Used it to secure lines with high-risk lenders. Once one saw potential, the others lined up. And now you owe how many people? Ethan said nothing. Rachel stared at him, furious and frightened. Do you even know? He shook his head. A wave of nausea surged through her. This wasn't a single bad investment or an impulsive move. This was rot that had spread through every corner of their lives. Quietly, then all at once. I can't believe this, she whispered. I didn't want to drag you into it. But you did, she snapped. Not just with my name, with your lies. Every time you said you were close to a breakthrough. Every time you swore you had it under control. Ethan's voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mom. She turned away. She didn't want his apology. She wanted time back. Options. Trust. I kept trying to fix it, he said softly. That's why I left tonight. I was trying to find that guy from the mixer, the one who introduced me to Knox. I thought if I could just talk to him, get him to mediate. Rachel's blood ran cold. You were followed tonight, and you still went looking for more deals? Not a deal, he said. Leverage, something I could use to stop this. She stared at him, equal parts awed and horrified. You still think you can outmaneuver them? I have to try. Rachel sat down heavily. Her body felt older than it had in years. Her lawyer wasn't calling back. The authorities were circling, and her son, the one she thought she might still save, was unraveling faster than she could keep up. She rubbed her eyes, then looked up at him. I need to see everything you have, she said. Every file, every transaction, every name. Ethan nodded. Okay. Rachel stared at the name on her screen like it had been carved into the glass. DK Capital. She clicked into the file. The records were thin, just a few transactions. but the signature at the bottom of one jumped out like a slap. David M. Cooper. She read it 3 times before the nausea hit. It wasn't a coincidence. It wasn't a shared acronym. It was him. David Cooper. Her financial advisor, her trusted friend, the man who'd managed her life savings for over a decade, had a private equity firm, one with direct deposits tied to Ethan's shell company. And he'd said nothing. She drove to his office without calling first, rage lighting up every nerve in her body. If he wasn't there, she'd wait in the parking lot all night. But he was there. He looked up from his desk as she stormed in, his expression cool but wary. "Rachel," he said, standing. "You all right?" She didn't sit. "I found your name in the investor records. DK Capital." David's shoulders stiffened just slightly. "That's not public information." "Ethan gave me access. You want to tell me how your name ended up on a loan linked to my son's collapse?" He rounded his desk slowly, hands in his pockets. "It's not what you think." Rachel folded her arms. "Isn't it?" David sighed and moved to close the door behind her. "Look, 6 months ago, I was underwater. Quietly. Divorce. A real estate deal gone bad. A tax audit. It all hit at once. I didn't tell anyone. I couldn't. I thought I could fix it." Her stomach turned. "So you used my son?" "No," he said sharply. "He came to me, told me about Knox, the fund, the crypto expansion. He needed backing. I saw the same deck he showed you. Looked legit. So you invested?" "I partnered," David clarified. "Helped him open a holding account. Introduced him to people I knew. Structured it through DK as a middleman to give it legitimacy." "Without telling me?" "You weren't involved yet." Rachel's voice was low, dangerous. "I was the guarantor on a $7.4 million fraud, and you put your name on the other end." David looked away. "You think I wanted this? I think you knew." "David," she spat, "I think you saw a way to clean up your mess using my son's desperation and my blind trust." He walked past her to the bar cart by the bookshelf, poured himself a scotch. "Don't paint this like I'm some villain, Rachel. I was trying to survive, just like you are now." She stared at him, horrified. "You're still in it." He didn't answer. That was answer enough. The room spun slightly. Her hands shook, not from shock, but from clarity. All those years she thought she'd been working with someone who cared, someone professional, reliable. David had been grooming her trust like a weapon, setting the stage for this. "You sat across from me last week and told me this wasn't your fault." David took a sip, eyes on the floor. "Because admitting otherwise would have meant I was finished. Financially, professionally, everything." "You are finished," she said. He looked up. "Rachel, I'm removing every account, every dollar. I'll file a complaint with the SEC if I have to. And if I find even one record that links your firm to those fraudulent contracts." "You won't." She stepped closer, voice like ice. "If I do, I won't just burn your business down. I'll testify to the fire." David set his glass down, jaw tight. "You're making this personal." "You made it personal," she said. "The second you signed your name next to my son's on a lie." She turned and walked out, never once looking back. The sun was barely up when Rachel pulled into the parking garage beneath Hannah McKay's building. Her hands were steady, but her stomach wasn't. She'd been awake since 3 a.m., sitting on the floor in Ethan's room, going over every document, signature, and timestamp he'd uploaded into the shared folder. David's name was only the beginning. There were others. Half-real LLCs with crossover deposits, loan terms buried inside funding memos. Rachel didn't fully grasp it, but the one thing she did know was this. She wasn't just the collateral anymore. She was the target. By the time she walked into Hannah's office, the young associate at the front desk didn't even bother announcing her. Hannah was already waiting. "No appointment?" she asked without looking up. No time, Rachel replied, dropping a new stack of printouts onto the desk. We need to talk. Hannah scanned the documents quickly, her mouth tightening. David Cooper? Rachel nodded. I knew he was involved, Hannah muttered. But I didn't know he was that involved. Rachel sat down, her voice sharper than she intended. So, tell me exactly what I'm looking at, and don't sugarcoat it. Hannah closed the folder and leaned back. Legally? You're in a firestorm. The debts aren't just loans. They're bound by layered corporate structures, joint ventures, revenue share agreements, silent partnerships. Some of them are unregulated, offshore, and deliberately vague. Meaning? Meaning you are linked to multiple contracts, some forged, some real, that tie you to several investment entities. Some you signed as a guarantor, others as an officer of record, which means the liability falls on you unless you can prove otherwise. Rachel rubbed her temples. What happens if I can't? Worst case? Hannah said. They seize your assets. All of them. Business, real estate, retirement accounts. You might not go to prison, but you could be left with nothing. Rachel stared at the floor, her throat tight. And Ethan? Depends what comes out. He forged your name, which is criminal. But if we can frame it as him acting alone, you have a shot at carving out a separate defense, especially if you take action now. Action like what? Hannah leaned forward. You file a civil suit against Ethan, officially, publicly. Establish that he used your identity and business records without consent. It won't be pretty, but it puts legal daylight between you and him. Rachel's chest ached. Sue my own son? It's your only shot at protecting yourself, and your company, and maybe him too. Because if this case hits federal court and you're lumped together, you both drown. Rachel stood and walked to the window. Outside, traffic was picking up. People going to jobs, dropping kids at school, living lives she barely recognized anymore. She swallowed hard. If I file, and I win, what happens to him? Best case? He gets to restructure his debt. Bankruptcy. Maybe probation. Worst case? He's charged with fraud and conspiracy. Rachel pressed her forehead to the glass. Jesus. You can't save him if you're sinking with him. The words echoed through the room, cold and final. Rachel turned back to Hannah. If I file, can I withdraw it later? Maybe, but that's not how this works. Once it's out there, it's out there. She sat again, slower this time. Her hands found her lap, fingers tightening together until her knuckles went white. Hannah's voice softened. You have every right to be angry. But this isn't about vengeance. It's about survival. You've got maybe a week before asset freezes start. You wait too long? You won't be choosing anymore. The government will. Rachel looked at the file. Ethan's signature. Her own, duplicated in clean, elegant forgery. David's embedded like a parasite in the background. She nodded once. Do it. You're sure? Rachel's voice didn't waver. If I have to destroy what's left of my relationship with my son to keep us both alive, then yes. I'm sure. Rachel sat alone at her desk, the soft whir of the ceiling fan doing nothing to quiet the noise inside her head. Her business portfolio was open on her monitor. Spreadsheets, client logs, cash flow projections, all of it meticulously built over 23 years. It was her life, her independence. Her name on every invoice, and she was thinking about selling it. The thought made her nauseous. She reached for her coffee, now cold, and didn't drink. Her hands hovered over the keyboard like maybe, if she waited long enough, some other answer would materialize. But none had. The email was drafted and waiting in her outbox. Subject: Offer to sell. Private discretion requested. All she had to do was hit send. Her phone buzzed. Peter. She answered on the second ring. Hey, he said gently. You're up early. I never went to sleep, Rachel murmured. You thinking about the sale? She hesitated. Hannah says it might buy us enough time to negotiate with the bigger creditors. It could give Ethan a window, buy him time to stabilize or at least protect what's left of his name. But if I sell now, at a discount, I lose everything I've worked for. Peter's voice was calm, even. It's not everything, Rach. It's not you. It's just one part. It's the part that kept me standing when everything else was falling apart, she said. When Daniel left. When Ethan dropped out of grad school. When my mother died. This business is the one thing that never abandoned me. Peter was quiet for a long beat. Then don't give it up. I might not have a choice. You always have a choice, but you don't always like the options. Rachel sighed and rubbed her eyes. Would you do it? If it were your son? Peter hesitated. I'd think long and hard about what saving him would really look like, and whether doing it this way teaches him anything. Rachel leaned back in her chair. The ceiling fan spun above her, a slow, hypnotic circle. That's the part I can't shake. If I sell this, if I bleed for him, what's left of me when this is over? Maybe that's the wrong question, Peter said softly. Maybe the question is, who are you, if you don't? She ended the call without saying goodbye. He would understand. 2 hours later, Ethan sat across from her at the dining table, his eyes dull, his shoulders slumped like sandbags. He hadn't shaved. His shirt was inside out. The boy who once had answers for everything was gone. I need your input, she said. There's an offer on the table. A private equity firm is interested in buying the business. Quick turnaround, 30-day close. He blinked at her. That's huge. I know. Are you going to do it? That's what I'm asking you. He shook his head slowly. Mom, I can't make that call. Not after everything. Too late, she said quietly. You already did. When you started signing my name on documents and thought it wouldn't come back. He looked like he might cry, but didn't. If you sell it, you'll hate me more. She nodded. And if I don't, I might lose everything anyway. So help me out here. What would you do if you were me? Ethan swallowed. Honestly, I'd cut my losses. Let me take the fall. That's not a plan. That's a surrender. Maybe it's what I deserve. Rachel stood. She walked to the window. The same view she'd had for years. City lights, corner bodega, dog walkers, traffic. The ordinary world. Spinning while hers burned. She breathed in slowly, then turned back. I'm not selling. Ethan's head snapped up. If I sell, this story ends with you broken and me erased, and I won't let either of us go down like that. He looked stunned. Then what are you going to do? I'm going to fight, not just to survive, but to win. The kitchen table was covered in color-coded folders, tax records, bank statements, investment contracts. Rachel had arranged them like a war map, each one a battlefield. But this morning felt different. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't drowning in it. She was swimming through it. Ethan stood at the counter. Sleeves rolled, pouring coffee into 2 mismatched mugs. He looked different, calmer, focused. The despair was still there, but it no longer defined him. He set the mug in front of her. I restructured the timeline spreadsheet. You were right. The Cayman transfers don't align with the pitch deck dates. Someone altered the cap table after the fact. Rachel raised an eyebrow. You're sure? I triple-checked, he said, and I backed it up on an encrypted drive. I also called the accountant who prepped my 1099s last year. She's sending notarized copies of the originals. Rachel sipped the coffee and didn't smile. But something softened behind her eyes. Good, she said. We'll add it to the affidavit. He nodded and sat beside her. No arguments, no excuses, just work. Later that afternoon, Rachel met Peter at the courthouse to finalize the motion Hannah had prepped. A strategic declaration distancing Rachel's business from Ethan's accounts. It was a legal formality, but it was also symbolic. She wasn't cutting Ethan loose. She was drawing the battle lines around both of them. Peter walked her back to her car. "You look taller," he said, grinning. She gave him a tired smile. "I feel awake, like the fog is lifting. That's what happens when you stop reacting and start moving." "I was going to sell everything," she said. "Give it all away to keep this from breaking him." "I know." "And now?" Peter looked at her. "Now you're fighting smarter." They stood by her car for a moment, neither in a rush to leave. The late afternoon sun bathed the courthouse steps in a soft gold. "I don't know how this ends," Rachel admitted. "No one does," he replied. "But you're no longer waiting for the wreckage. You're building the road." Back home, Ethan was on a Zoom call, pitching himself, not as a victim, but as someone ready to repair. Rachel leaned quietly against the wall, listening. He didn't beg for help. He took ownership. "I screwed up," Ethan said into the mic. "Not just legally, but morally. I betrayed trust. And I don't expect redemption, but I am working for it. If you'll let me." Rachel closed her eyes. Not in pain this time, in something close to pride. That night they worked side by side until 2 a.m., tagging files, drafting statements, prepping court exhibits. At one point, Rachel caught herself delegating, not because she was too tired to do it, but because she finally believed he'd do it right. And he did. By morning, the table was clean. The documents were filed. The first court hearing had a date. And for the first time in months, there was oxygen in the room. "I forgot what it felt like," Rachel whispered. "What?" Ethan asked. "To breathe. But change doesn't come without shadows." At 11:52 a.m., her email pinged. The subject line was simple. "Final reminder, 12 p.m. deadline approaching." She opened it. A scanned document. A signature, hers, tied to a dummy contract she'd never seen before. It linked her to a corporate entity she knew Ethan hadn't touched, one she recognized immediately, Knox and Thatcher Holdings. The Thatcher wasn't a name she'd seen in years. But it was real, because once upon a time, she'd signed it herself. The morning after the Knox and Thatcher email, Rachel sat with Hannah in the conference room, fingers pressed to her temples, a legal pad untouched in front of her. The walls were lined with framed diplomas and thick law books, but none of them seemed heavy enough to ground her. "This contract," Rachel said slowly, tapping the printout. "I signed it in 2014. It was dormant, non-binding. It had nothing to do with Ethan." "And yet," Hannah replied, "it's been activated, retroactively, which means someone's leveraging your past to tie you deeper into this mess." Rachel looked up. "Knox." Hannah didn't argue. "We'll challenge the enforceability. You were listed as a consultant, not a partner. It's thin, Rachel, but it's fightable." That word again. Fightable. Rachel sat back and let out a long breath. "That's all I need to hear." Back at home, Ethan was on the phone with a compliance specialist, going line by line through the loan structures. The man she saw now wasn't the one who had disappeared behind shame and silence. He was doing the work, and when he saw her walk in, he ended the call early. "Hey, everything okay?" Rachel handed him the Knox and Thatcher file. "We've got another knot to untangle." He looked at it, then back at her, brow furrowed. "That's not from me." "I know." He opened his mouth to say something else, but she waved it off. "Later. What matters now is that we're not blindsided. Not anymore." Ethan gave her a slow, measured nod. "I'm with you." And she believed him. That evening, Sarah came by with Thai takeout and a scowl that could cut stone. "You've lost 10 pounds and 5 years off your life. Eat." Rachel didn't argue. Sarah poured wine, kicked off her shoes, and sat cross-legged on the couch. "So where are we?" Rachel updated her, briefly, bluntly. Knox and Thatcher. Court filings. The frozen assets that might not stay frozen if the judge sided with them. And Ethan. The progress. The shifts. Sarah listened, then leaned forward, eyes fierce. "You're not alone in this. Don't act like you have to be. You want help calling in favors? I've got a list. You want research? I'll tear into the LLC databases myself." Rachel's throat tightened. "I don't know how to ask for help." "Too bad. You're getting it anyway." The next morning, Peter called. "Got a judge," he said. "You're on the docket next Thursday. We've got 6 days." Rachel was quiet for a beat. "That's enough time." "You're sure?" "No," she said. "But I'm showing up anyway." As the days passed, the house filled with motion, paperwork, deadlines, conversations that didn't end in slammed doors or held back tears. On Wednesday night, Rachel walked past Ethan's room and saw him sitting at his desk, glasses on, typing one-handed while highlighting a financial report with the other. His laptop was plugged into 2 monitors, Post-its framing the screen. Focused. Composed. She knocked lightly. "How's it going?" He turned. "Still think I was an idiot?" "I think you were young," she said. "And scared. And arrogant." "Still am." She stepped in, leaned against the doorframe. "You're also learning. Owning things. That counts." Ethan smiled faintly. "I didn't think you'd still want to fight after that email." Rachel shook her head. "If I gave up every time something old tried to bury me, I wouldn't have survived the first half of my life." He looked at her for a long time. "I'm sorry I almost ruined everything." "You didn't ruin everything," she said quietly. "You just changed it." Thursday morning arrived too fast. Rachel stood in the mirror adjusting her navy blazer, the same one she'd worn to close her first business deal 20 years ago. Her reflection looked older, sharper, but not smaller, not beaten. Ethan appeared in the doorway, suit wrinkled, tie crooked. "You ready?" She turned, fixing his collar. "No." He smiled. "Same." They drove to the courthouse in silence, but it wasn't heavy. It was steady, like a boat cutting clean through rough water. The courtroom was beige and windowless, but the air felt charged, like the seconds before a storm.